Hi, my name is Sarah, and today I'm going to talk about the concept of class, how it plays a role in human culture, and how people are placed into different groups based on things such as wealth, income, occupation, or education, all which serve a basis for inequality in society. To start, let's look at a definition of class. So class is basically, quote, a system of power based on wealth, income, and status that creates an unequal distribution of society's resources. It is a system created by the capitalist mode of production, which I will discuss shortly. So why does class exist? Class only exists because of social inequality. Inequality directly affects one's class identity. Class identity refers to how people understand their position in this unequal society and how they relate to others on that basis. So why is class important, and why do anthropologists study class? Anthropologists study how class systems promote the ways that people organize themselves into groups based on their access to resources, power, and status. Class can influence people's access to healthcare, education, and quality of employment, as well as affect a person's identity, their social relationships, and how they view the world. Anthropologists also study how class affects people's ability to resist or challenge inequalities in order to close the gap between the classes. Class or social stratification emerged in response to the development of the modes of production. A mode of production is the way a society is organized to produce what people need to survive. There are three main types. First, with a kin-ordered mode of production, as found in hunter-gatherer societies, equality and reciprocity is favored. Societies are small and people produce only what they need. They share food, clothing, shelter, and other resources based on kin groups or families. In a tributary mode of production, for example, feudalism in England, we have the peasants who were basically able to work for themselves, but lived and worked on land owned by lords. The peasants had to produce more than what is needed, and the surplus went to the lords. In a feudal system, often things were extracted by force, and there was definitely a large amount of violence against common people in feudal times for both the lords and the peasants. With regards to the capitalist mode of production, a very small class of capitalists own what's called the means of production: the land, the machinery, the factories, and other resources that it takes to produce what people need. The people who don't own the means of production work for wages and are called the working class. The capitalist class and the working class have conflicting interests because they are both fighting to maximize their respective profits or wages. A major contributor to the emergence of different classes was the Industrial Revolution, which led to the rise of capitalism. Capitalism promotes inequality because a small number of capitalists are rich and powerful, while a large number of working class people struggle to get ahead. The capitalists make profit from selling things for more than it costs to make them. Meanwhile, the working class, who are the vast majority of society, have to work to survive by collecting wages or selling their labor to capitalists. To illustrate the unequal distribution of wealth, the chart here shows that less than 1% of the population owns 41% of the world's wealth, while at the other end of the spectrum, almost 69% of the population owns only 3% of the world's wealth. To illustrate the concept of class, the case study I chose relates to the use of migrant labor in the United States agricultural sector. In 2016, anthropologist Sara Dillon studied how Hispanic migrant farm workers, also referred to as ghost workers, have been exploited in the agricultural sector for both field labor and in food processing plants. These undocumented laborers have been growing at an alarming rate and have been an important political issue in the United States for a long time. From a class perspective, these workers can be characterized as modern-day slave labor. Horton spent a total of 16 months doing ethnographic research on undocumented migrant workers using fieldwork and interviews to study labor conditions in the small farming community of Mendota, California, where a high proportion of migrant workers were living in poverty. About 97% of the population was Hispanic, and over 43% were living below the poverty line. Horton conducted interviews with many migrant farm workers, labor supervisors, field bosses, and labor contractors. Her study revealed that migrant workers were taken advantage of by their employees since they were working under assumed identities. Because these migrant workers were working under assumed identities, they constantly faced discrimination and inequality. They were subjected to unsafe working conditions, low wages, long work hours, and extreme heat, unsanitary and crowded housing conditions, verbal abuse, lack of health care, discrimination, and threat of deportation. They had no access to legal protection or rights, and being new to the country, they could not advocate for themselves, resulting in exploitation due to class inequality. Capitalism and class come into play with respect to migrant workers. The capitalists in this case seek to maximize their profits by exploiting the migrant workers and using coercion in the form of threats of deportation as a means of control. Migrant workers are looked upon as low-class society as they often have little education, live in poverty, and must provide physical labor to earn a living. Moreover, these migrant workers are often invisible to the rest of the world because they are often undocumented and not recognized as legitimate citizens. This concept of class and worker exploitation can be observed not only with migrant workers in the United States agricultural sector, but in many places around the world, such as sweatshops, where workers are underpaid, overworked, and taken advantage of. So, some questions for further study might include: how are migrant workers today resisting and challenging the status quo? What is the government doing to protect the life of migrant workers and improve their situation? How does the migrant life impact their families and community? Does Canada have similar issues with respect to migrant workers? And if so, how do we ensure they're treated fairly? What is the role of the anthropologist to better understand the issues faced by migrant workers with regards to helping them overcome these issues? So, that is the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening.